Welcome to another FPL video. Today we're looking ahead to the Game Week 9 team selection. There will be an updated version once I make a few more changes to my wildcard team, but I'm going to show you what I've done. I've already activated the chip, and I'll also talk about my Game Week 8 performance and talk about how I can improve and recover from a bad start to the season. Let's get this video to over 300 likes, and we're very close to 15,000 subscribers, so let's keep on pushing. And without further ado, let's get straight into this one. I took a -4 hit in Game Week 8, which involved Nick Pope, and this is why I always say to try to avoid these -4 hits for goalkeepers as much as you can. I thought it would be worth it this week, especially for those of you that don't have a wild card, you've already used it, and you want a long-term goalkeeper. So in that case, I think the hit still would pay off. But for those like me who just wanted a one-week punt potentially, and then you're going to wildcard in Game Week 9, it just didn't make any sense at all. You needed Nick Pope to keep a clean sheet, and then you'd only make maybe 2 or 3 points, depending on if you got saves or bonus points. So that was a bad transfer in the end, and it wasn't my only one as part of my -4 hit. But in the end, Nick Pope got 2 points. Billing ended the clean sheet for my double Newcastle defence, and it is what it is. But I still like Nick Pope on the wildcard and long-term. But as a one-week punt, never take a -4 hit for a goalkeeper. I got attacking returns from 2 of my defenders, but it was Cancelo who ended up getting the 9-pointer. Trippier got the assist by winning the penalty. Perisic got an assist, but got subbed off around the 55th minute mark. And not only that, he got booked when he was already on the bench. So that was a bit of a disaster class. He also considered 2 goals before he came off. So a 2-pointer despite getting an assist definitely isn't the greatest feeling. Cancelo, though, 3 bonus points in a 3-0 victory for Man City, and he's just a bonus points machine. He's also decent from attacking threat perspective, but he's also not the greatest. I do recognise that, but at the same time, I still think he's the best defender in general because he's got those assists in his locker. I think he's got a few more goals in him, which he hasn't shown just yet, at least in the Premier League. And not only that, the bonus points, he's a machine, and Man City have the best defence, so there will be plenty of clean sheets there for Cancelo owners. And Trippier is good value for money. I'm not the biggest fan of double Newcastle defence, and those of you with triple Newcastle defence would have been probably fuming after the Bournemouth game, but I still think this double up is worth it because of the bonus points and the ceiling for both of these players. Pope is arguably the best goalkeeper in the game right now, and Trippier is one of the best defenders, if not the best, at his price and below. Let me know what you think, and on a wild card, will you be going for both of them? Remember, you don't have to always play them every single game. You can sometimes bench Trippier and play Nick Pope, and sometimes Newcastle will keep clean sheets when you don't expect them to. So I like this defence, but in the long term, I don't think Perisic will make the cut. He is still worth a consideration on a wildcard though. The only transfer that paid off this week was Kevin De Bruyne as part of the -4, so in the end it was worth it, but ultimately, when I look down at it, I could have just played Ward, who got 0 points after conceding 6 to Spurs, and I actually would have still benefited from that because Nick Pope only got 2 points. But in the end, Kevin De Bruyne, great transfer. I'm really happy with him. Obviously, he is kind of overshadowed by the Heung-min Son masterclass against Leicester City. Coming off the bench and producing a 19-pointer with a hat-trick is absolutely astounding. It's not going to happen so many times this season, so fair play to those of you that had a feeling about Son, even if you had suspicions of him being benched. But look at the rest of my midfield. Leon, Bailey, Andreas and Martinelli, just absolutely awful. The only thing I can say is at least Bailey and Martinelli got clean sheet points, but really I'm scraping down the barrel here. Herrera got a yellow card, so only a 1-pointer there, and I was expecting some good things from him and Mitrovic, but it just wasn't meant to be. In the end though, kind of a good performance all round for most of the players in my squad, but not that midfield, with the exception of Kevin De Bruyne. So Martinelli is someone that a lot of people are considering going off on the wild card, and to be honest, I do understand that. It's just at his price and below, the only one who is a bit similar in terms of price and also could be a good option in the future is Marcus Rashford. You've also got a few other Brighton midfielders like Pascal Gross, but they've got some poor fixtures, and obviously they blanked in Game Week 8. So it's not the easiest situation, and as much as I like Martinelli, I do understand that some people don't want to go with him. I like the fixtures from Game Week 13 to 17, but in the meantime, there's only one good game against Leeds, and the rest could be very tough, such as Tottenham up next, and also Liverpool, and then you've got the blank in Game Week 12 to also think about. But I have to say, around his price and below, Martinelli for me is by far the best asset, and as for Bailey and Andres Pereira, they're 2 of the best budget options, but at the same time, I don't want 2 of these kind of choices in my midfield. I'd rather have just one and then bolster my midfield, which I think has been probably one of my downfalls this season. The midfield hasn't been good enough, but there we go. That was the midfield in Game Week 8. Now let's move on to the forward line. Arguably the biggest FPL disappointment this week was Mitrovic, but he's not going to score in every single game. And I think there's only one other occasion where Fulham scored 3 goals or more and Mitrovic wasn't involved, and that was against Birmingham City in the Championship in this calendar year. But he's still one of the best options on a wild card. I wouldn't hesitate, and I still think he's better than Isak. Let me know what you think of that down in the comment section below, who's also another good choice. But with Callum Wilson coming back to the fore very soon, probably after the international break, and I just don't really trust Isak in terms of goals and goal contributions compared to Mitrovic and Tony. I would actually opt for those two, as I discussed in the best wildcard team video. Erling Haaland, I mean, we don't need to talk about him too much. Man City were in control despite not having their best performance, but in the end, they're the best team in the league and they will score so many goals and they'll probably keep the most clean sheets. So that's why, for me, Cancelo, De Bruyne and Haaland are right now the best assets in each of their respective positions. Gabriel Jesus scored, but he got a yellow card, and he's 1 yellow card away from suspension now, and it's quite likely they might get one against Tottenham and then be suspended for Liverpool. So for a lot of us that are wildcarding this week, or even those that are going to make a free transfer and get rid of Jesus for Tony, Mitrovic or Isak, I think it's a good time to do it with the fixtures, the Blank Gameweek 12. Jesus is 1 yellow card away from suspension, and look, he's been exceptional this season, 4 goals and 3 assists, and it's just a shame he got that yellow because he was actually on for 2 bonus points. So in the end, he technically lost out on 2 points. You know, for the yellow card, he lost 1, and he also lost out on 1 bonus point. But there you go. Jesus has been exceptional this season for Arsenal, but I think right now is the best time to look to sell. And I actually expected him to outscore Ivan Toney this week, but at the same time, I also thought Mitrovic would outscore Isak. So you can't get everything right. In the end, I'm quite happy with this team. Now let me show you what my current rank is, which to be honest, it's not really too good. And I'll show you who my captain was, which I think you all know by this point. Of course, Erling Haaland was my captain and Mitrovic was my vice this time, and my rank actually dipped slightly from around 1 million to 1.2, and I think the -4 hit was a big reason why. And if I had wildcarded, I would have brought in the likes of Maddison, but I may not have actually started him, so I don't regret it too much. I also had a few doubts about the wildcard because Emerson Palmieri was someone I was thinking of going for as my 4 million defender, but I also talked about this. I don't expect him to start every single game. I thought he would against Everton, but in the weeks to come, I thought Creswell could come in. Well, it actually happened as soon as game week 8, so I am concerned about that. And there's also a few other options that I'm a bit more convinced about, such as Patterson, who could actually be the best 4.1 million defender and below. Everton have just kept 2 clean sheets on the bounce and they look more solid with Tarkowski and Connor Cody, so that's something else to think about. But I got 55 points overall with the -4 hit taken into account. I got 51, so it wasn't too great, but I do have the wildcard in my back pocket, which I have activated for Game Week 9, and I'm going to talk about what my current Game Week 9 team is. Be sure to also check out the best wildcard team, because for me, that is the best on paper, but there's a few other things to consider, which I'm going to talk about in this video. I would still go for Nick Pope on a wildcard, but there are a few other alternatives such as Gaeta, who I talked about in recent videos, and you also still have Dean Henderson and Robert Sanchez, but I don't like Brighton's fixtures. I don't trust Nottingham Forest at all defensively, so really it's Gaeta or Nick Pope, and I also don't really trust Crystal Palace to keep clean sheets consistently. And I don't mind having a cheap defender, maybe such as Gay or Anderson, but not enough to go for a goalkeeper to start week in, week out, because I ultimately do not want Ward anywhere near my first team, or Iverson, for example. So Nick Pope is my goalkeeper. You've also got potentially Edison, Alisson if Liverpool start, getting things up a gear, but I don't think it's worth going for a 5.5 or 5.4 million goalkeeper. Nick Pope is 5.2, but I've got a bit of value tied up in him, so he actually only cost me 5.1. So in the end, I think I'm going to go for the Newcastle shot stopper. Which goalkeeper are you going for on the wild card? And if you have played the chip already, which goalkeeper do you want up until Game Week 17? I know there's a lot of love for Gaeta, but I still think it's worth going for the Newcastle goalkeeper instead. I think it's a bit tricky when you go to the defenders right now, because ultimately you want Trent in the long term, but they've got some really poor fixtures over the next 3 or 4, and ideally you'd want the Liverpool assets from Game Week 12 onwards, and that's why if you aren't playing the wildcard this week, I would highly suggest considering Game Week 12, where you can start to bring in the likes of Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and maybe a third Liverpool asset if they show a bit of form over the next few weeks. And you can start to differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd. It's going to be very difficult for Game Week 8 or Game Week 9 wildcarders to deassemble their team, get rid of maybe some premium defenders, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne or Heung-min Son, to then get these assets that I just talked about. But I am going for Trippier here, and I'm a bit unsure about double Newcastle defence against Fulham. I don't really expect a clean sheet here, So that's something I am going to consider over the next week or so. But Joao Cancelo is a lock-in. I don't care if he plays Man United. I also don't care if he blanks in Game Week 12. I think he's a must-have almost in the wild card. I don't like to call anyone essential, and to be honest, you can go without him considering the next few fixtures for City as well as the Game Week 12 blank, but I still think he's the best defender in the game, and so I'm going to go for him, and that's about it. Reece James away to Crystal Palace is also not the best fixture on paper, so I'm not expecting a lot from my defensive line, but I still trust these options in the long term because of their fixture and the attacking potential. This is where things get very interesting. I've gone for Heung-min Son right now over Kevin De Bruyne, but things could change. And I think Kevin De Bruyne has been far more consistent and a better option than Heung-min Son this season. He's only had one good game, and even then he came off the bench against the worst team in the league and made an impact. But that isn't enough to really justify going for Heung-min Son over Harry Kane or Kevin De Bruyne. But the reason why I've gone for this is for several reasons. The first one is that Heung-min Son provides you a good different captaincy option in Game Week 11 when Man City play Liverpool. Maybe you don't want to go for Erling Haaland, and that's completely fine. You have Heung-min Son at home to Everton, and it's also a really good structure where you can easily go from Heung-min Son to De Bruyne from Game Week 13 onwards, or Mohamed Salah from Game Week 12 onwards, and that's what I'm looking to do with this team, as I'll show you later on in FPL.team. But I think Heung-min Son's good for the structure. Like I keep on saying in the last few videos, I prefer having one premium midfielder and one premium forward rather than two premium forwards, but it's completely up to you what you go for, and I'm still not completely convinced by Heung-min Son, and he's up against Arsenal next, who are the best team in the league as things stand. Obviously, I think Man City are the best overall, but I don't think Arsenal will be as poor defensively as Leicester were. But what I would say is that if Arsenal are naive with the high line as they were against United, then Heung-min Son actually has a chance of returns there, so it might not be as bad as it seems on paper. As for the other three midfielders, they've also featured in my last few videos, such as James Maddison. I think he's a fantastic option. He hauled against Spurs and he's so consistent. And I think once the fixtures turn and once things improve with Leicester, I think he also has the possibility of bonus points and also multiple attacking returns in a game, starting with Nottingham Forest at home, which I think is an incredible fixture, and the games after that also look pretty good. So if there's ever a time for Leicester to bounce back, it would be here. And I don't like most of the Leicester options because Leicester in general have been woeful, but Maddison has still been consistent, and I think he's still a great FPL option despite his team being so poor. And Wilfried Zaha is facing Chelsea, and I've got a bit of a dilemma here, a conflict between James and Zaha, but Zaha is a fantastic long-term option up until the World Cup, with those fixtures from Game Week 10 being absolutely sensational. And then Martinelli at home to Tottenham, as I always say, I think he's the best option at his price and below, and that's why I've gone for him, for the structure. But otherwise, I could maybe go to Saka or even Jarrod Bowen, but I don't trust West Ham offensively, and I'd rather go for their defensive assets like Soufal or even Emerson Palmieri potentially, just as a 4 million option. And I don't trust West Ham that much in terms of the attack. They aren't scoring enough goals, and they're in the relegation zone as things stand. So I do prefer Martinelli, but I do recognise that his fixtures are poor. He blanks in Game Week 12 and only leads in Game Week 11, really makes it worth it over the next 3 or 4. But what I like about Arsenal assets, especially Martinelli, is that he's so cheap, and he also has some great fixtures from Game Week 13 to 17, and he's very easy to bench in Game Week 12. The only noticeable change in my forward line would be Ivan Toney in for Gabriel Jesus, but I'd also keep Mitrovic and Haaland from my Game Week 8 squad. And you could also go for Harry Kane instead of Ivan Toney and go for that forward line. It's just down to personal preference and what structure you're looking for. And I do like the idea of having a Spurs attacker as a captaincy alternative, potentially in Game Week 11, for example, when City play Liverpool, and also when City blank in Game Week 12. So I do think the Spurs attackers do pose a nice differential captaincy option. And for me, in terms of looking at in isolation, who's the better pick? I do think Harry Kane's better than Heung-min Son, but you also have to think about the structure, especially on a wild card when you want to maybe plan this team up until the World Cup in November. So it's definitely something very interesting to think about, and I am open-minded to going for Harry Kane and 2 premium forwards, but that's something I have to mull over during the international break. And I love this starting 11, I have to say, and it's also got some decent coverage, and without making any transfers, I do have a full 11 in Game Week 12. Now let me show you how my team looks like in the future game weeks using FPL.team, and you can get an idea of why I'm currently going for something like this on my wildcard. In Game Week 10, I would go for this starting 11 with Nick Pope in goal, Reece James, Cancelo and Trippier. And in terms of defensive coverage, I've got Anderson and Patterson on my bench with Andres Pereira split in between them. In the midfield, I've got Zaha, Son, Maddison and Martinelli, who does have a tough fixture against Liverpool, but I still like this midfield and I think it can get me plenty of points. And the forward line speaks for itself. Haaland will be the captain, Heung-min Son the vice, but you could also start to maybe deviate away from the Erling Haaland captaincy from time to time, as Game Week 8 proved, and benefit from it. And that's your way to make ground. But obviously it's going to be a risk, and if Haaland, goes absolutely crazy, then you will suffer as a result. So you have to pick and choose your battles, and hopefully you're on the right side of luck on certain occasions. Mitrovic and Tony also completing the front line, and once again, pretty much identical to the Game Week 9 team, but I really like the starting 11, and I think for most game weeks it can get the job done. When we look at Game Week 11, there are a few problems with this wildcard squad, mainly in the defence. So I've got Nick Pope away to Man United, and I've also got Kieran Trippier, and the kind of replacement for him potentially could be Anderson, but he's facing Leicester, and as bad as they are still good offensively, and I have a clash with James Maddison, so that's not maybe ideal, and my squad is a bit weak in the defence in Game Week 11 with this wildcard team, but for the most part, it's still fairly solid. Joao Cancelo is facing Liverpool away, and despite their struggles, I think Liverpool could score a goal in that fixture and maybe take some points off Man City. And then you've got Reece James. To be honest, I like that fixture against Villa, and the midfield looks really good. All of their fixtures are exceptional, and the forward line, even with Erling Haaland facing Liverpool, I'm really happy with it. So it's just the defence that I'm a bit concerned about in Game Week 11, but apart from that, it looks really good. One of the big pros of this wildcard team is having money in the bank to go from Heung-min Son or Kevin De Bruyne to Salah. You have enough money. So for me personally, I'd have 1.3 million in the bank, and I could just do Heung-min Son to Salah and have him as the captaincy option in Game Week 12. And Liverpool have some good fixtures after that before the World Cup. And I can also look to bring in the likes of Trent, by the way, because in the space from Game Week 9 to 12, I've only used one free transfer. Of course, I have the possibility of making more, and I can bring in someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold in my defence and change my structure slightly, so I don't have to play the likes of Patterson and Anderson, which doesn't look that great. But my point here really is, with this wildcard squad, without making that many transfers, if any at all, I can actually have a full 11, and I would be pretty fairly set for Game Week 12 and that blank, and still have a really good team from Game Weeks 13 to 17. But I think Mohamed Salah is someone I'm looking to target from Game Week 12 onwards, and the same goes for Trent. I'm not sure about Triple Liverpool just yet, but those two are still amongst the best assets in the game, although they haven't really proven it so far this season in the Premier League. But I have to say, this squad looks really good in the long term, and I'm very, very happy with it. If we look at Game Week 13 as well very quickly, it also looks really solid, and I've got different captaincy options. Erling Haaland could be my captain here against Brighton, but I've also got Salah away to Nottingham Forest, so this looks pretty good actually. And remember, Salah would be coming in for Heung-min Son in Game Week 12 potentially, but that's not set in stone. I could change my mind, and I might even keep Heung-min Son up until the World Cup. But that's what I like about this wildcard squad: flexibility, and I also have good squad depth, and I'm very well set for Game Week 12. And not just that, also the period before that, as well as the fixtures afterwards up until Game Week 17. So let me know what you think of this wildcard squad. Do you think it's better than the squad I showed you in the best wildcard team video? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, found it useful, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to over 300 likes, and let's get to 15,000 subscribers. We're very close to that milestone, so thank you very much for all your support. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. All the links are in the description below. The same goes for the FPL League, the Discord server, and also the Patreon and channel memberships. We've got around, I think, 40 to 50 members, so thank you very much for all your support over the last few weeks. It's been incredible, and I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 9 and the rest of the season. Enjoy the international break, and I'll see you next time.